They say mistakes are meant to teach us lessons. They say regret is proof of our growth. They say guilt is the sign of a good conscience. But what if they're all wrong? What if the very idea of a mistake is the real mistake? Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, replaying a moment from the past over and over, wishing you had said something else, done something different, been someone better? We call it regret. We call it failure. We call it a lesson. But Osho calls it something else. A misunderstanding, not of the situation, but of yourself. Because when you say, I made a mistake, what you're really saying is, I should have been someone else. And that's where the wound begins. Our entire lives are built around the idea of avoiding mistakes. We're raised to chase perfection, to be good students, responsible adults, wise parents, moral citizens. And if we stumble, if we fall, we're told to be ashamed. But what if falling is the only honest movement we've ever made? What if mistakes are not failures, but fragments of truth breaking through our fake selves? You see, the mind is obsessed with control. It wants to be right. It wants to predict. It wants guarantees. And in that rigid pursuit, it denies the one thing that makes you alive: spontaneity. Have you noticed how children never worry about mistakes? They fall, they cry, they laugh, they try again. They live fully, not because they avoid error, but because they are unburdened by the idea of error. Only later do we teach them about should and shouldn't. We carve lines through their freedom. We call it discipline. We call it guidance. And we start doing it to ourselves. We begin living as if every choice is a test, every moment a potential judgment. And so we shrink, we hesitate, we silence our intuition, we second-guess our joy, all because we fear that some unseen force is waiting to punish us for not living up to an imagined standard. But who set that standard? And who benefits from your guilt? Maybe the real illusion isn't the act you regret, but the voice that told you to regret it. Osho once said, "Guilt is the shadow that follows you when society has stolen your soul." And when you hear that, you pause. You realize, maybe your so-called mistakes were not failures. They were footsteps, clumsy maybe, but sincere. You weren't wrong. You were real. That conversation you wish you could undo was the only truth you could speak in that moment. That relationship you feel ashamed of taught you what your textbooks never could. That decision you keep hiding was your soul searching for freedom in the only way it knew how. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's time to stop calling them mistakes and start calling them movements. Movements of a being learning to dance again after a lifetime of walking in straight lines. In today's video, we won't fix your past. We won't search for meaning in the wreckage. And we won't offer forgiveness for what needs no apology. Instead, we'll return, not to the scene of the crime, but to the place where the story was first told. The story that said, "You're broken, you're sinful, you're behind, you failed." We'll sit with that voice, not to silence it, but to see it for what it is, a frightened whisper from a world that forgot how to trust life. Osho never wanted you to live without risk. He never asked you to walk the perfect path. He simply invited you to walk your path, to stumble, to wander, to laugh at the chaos, and most importantly, to not take it personally. There are no mistakes. There is only life misunderstood. So before we begin, take a breath, not to cleanse, not to center, just to remember, you are not here to get it right. You are here to be here, and that, in itself, is enough. Osho does not speak about life in terms of right or wrong. He speaks of awareness, and where awareness is present, he says, mistakes disappear. In the Book of Understanding, Osho writes, "What you call a mistake is simply something that didn't go the way your mind wanted. That doesn't mean it was wrong. It means you were unconscious of life's deeper movement. That changes everything. We've been taught to measure our worth by outcomes, by how well things worked out, by how neatly we color inside the lines, by how little we embarrass ourselves. But Osho says, Embarrassment is the ego's reaction to truth showing up without its permission. When you act spontaneously and it doesn't match your ideal self, you label it a mistake. Why? Because the ego wants to be consistent, even at the cost of your freedom. Osho calls this the slavery of image. He says in Courage, the joy of living dangerously. The idea of a mistake arises because you are trying to live according to a borrowed map. You are afraid of your own inner compass. Let's pause there. A borrowed map. That's what most of us are using. We live inside the expectations of our parents, our teachers, our religion, our society. So of course, when we listen to our heart, and it doesn't match those maps, we panic. We call it a misstep. We feel shame. We try to rewind time and correct the path. But in doing so, we never realize we were never lost. We were simply not where they wanted us to be. And that is not a mistake. It is a miracle. It is life breaking through the blueprint. In The Art of Living and Dying, Osho reminds us, there is no fixed path. The river flows where it flows, curves, crashes, pauses, it overflows, and still it reaches the ocean. He urges us to stop trying to walk life like a highway. Instead, he invites us to float, to surrender the judgment, to witness what we feel, not what we were told to feel. Imagine this. You once yelled at someone you loved. In that moment, were you evil? Were you broken? No. In that moment, something inside you, perhaps pain, fear, exhaustion, cried out. Was it graceful? No. Was it real? Absolutely. And if you listen to that cry, without judging it, you will learn not how to never do it again, but how to understand what part of you needed love. That is awareness, not punishment, not performance, just seeing, with eyes that do not condemn. Osho says, the awakened man does not ask, was this right or wrong? He asks, was I present? It's not about morality. It's about mindfulness, not about perfection, but perception. And what happens when you truly perceive your so-called mistakes? They melt. The shame dissolves. The guilt becomes unnecessary. The inner critic goes quiet because you realize you were never wrong. You were only unaware. And now you are not. And that alone transforms the past. It doesn't mean you repeat the same patterns. It means you no longer fear them. You don't live to avoid the past. You live to embody the present. And the more you do, the less power the old wounds hold. Let's take another example. You regret leaving a job, a city, a relationship too early. You call it impulsive, a mistake. But what if that impulse was sacred? What if the soul sometimes whispers louder than logic? What if what you learned from leaving was the exact lesson you were meant to carry? Osho says, there is no growth without movement, and no movement without misstep. Celebrate the stumble. It means you are alive. So this is not about becoming someone who never errs. This is about becoming someone who no longer fears their humanness. In love, freedom, aloneness, Osho puts it beautifully. The truly free person can afford to be wrong, because he knows he is not trying to be right. He is trying to be real. There it is. Freedom is not in success. Freedom is in sincerity. The more you live sincerely, not for approval, not for control, the more life reveals its perfection, even in what once felt like ruin. And suddenly, you no longer have to fix your past. You only have to see it clearly. So when Osho says there's no such thing as a mistake, he's not encouraging recklessness. He's inviting responsibility, the kind that arises from love, not fear. Responsibility means responsibility, the ability to respond to life with presence. And in presence, every experience, even the broken ones, become whole. So now we come to a quiet place, not a conclusion, just a breath, a space where we don't have to be anyone, not the one who's always right, not the one who's always fixing, not even the one who's seeking, just here, as we are, without the labels we carry from the past. They said you made mistakes. They said you should regret. They said you should have known better. But maybe there was nothing wrong with the road you took. Maybe your detours weren't delays, just deeper journeys. Maybe what broke you was not a curse, but a crack through which your real self could finally emerge. Osho never asked you to be perfect. He only asked you to wake up. An awakening isn't about looking good. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about seeing the raw truth of your life, without flinching, without decorating it, without trying to undo it, just seeing it and breathing with it. Right now, maybe that one relationship didn't fail. Maybe it showed you the edges of your love, the places where fear disguised itself as control, the moments where longing was mistaken for possession. Maybe that job you quit, that dream you abandoned, that thing you said and can't unsay, maybe all of it wasn't a mistake, but a message from life to life, written in the only language it knows, experience. Osho says in the Book of Secrets, life is not to be understood intellectually. It is to be lived moment to moment, without resistance. But we resist, don't we? We want to go back, rewind the scene, rewrite the line, reshape the face we showed to the world. But the past is not a prison. It's not something to escape. It's a reflection to look into and bow to and release. Because the truth is, it doesn't exist anymore. Only your mind is keeping it alive. Only your judgment is keeping it heavy. What if you dropped the weight? Not by denial, but by reverence. What if you looked at your past and said softly, yes, that was me, confused, angry, unaware, but still me, still growing, still learning, still worthy. Can you forgive that version of you? Can you let them be without trying to erase them? Can you sit in silence and hear what they were trying to say? Maybe they weren't a failure. Maybe they were just tired, or scared, or human. And now, you are here. Not despite that version of you, but because of them. There is no mistake. There is only a deeper unfolding, a greater intelligence than your plans, a wilder wisdom than your perfectionism. Life never asks you to get it all right. It only asks you to stay awake, to feel, to fall, to rise, to feel again, and to honor the journey, not as a straight line, but as a spiral, always returning, always deepening, always softening. So now, the invitation is not to correct yourself, but to meet yourself, here, now, without the urge to judge, without the need to justify, without the craving to be better. Just this, a breath, a silence, a simple whisper within, I'm not broken, I'm becoming. And that becoming is not a performance. It's not for the world. It's not even for tomorrow. It is only for this moment, this breath, this presence. So, don't search for another teaching. Don't try to collect more wisdom. Don't chase healing like it's a trophy. Just stop and sit with yourself, with your so-called mistakes, with your misunderstood experiences. Let them speak. Let them become holy. Let them be the doorway through which you remember you were always on the path, even when you thought you were lost. And maybe you were never meant to become someone else. You were only meant to come home to yourself. Now, in silence,